It's Shawn. Thanks for tuning in today. If you haven't gotten the memo yet, there's a lot of complex areas in employment law, and today we're going to kind of take a look at some of the stuff we're seeing out there, why it may or may not be an issue, and some things you really need to think about beyond maybe what you hear in the mainstream media or what people are telling you about employment law and discrimination law. There really are some considerations that are beyond the pale that aren't really being brought up. And I want to say, too, you may not think this, but in many cases, discrimination is okay. And we'll talk about that in further detail in the video. So before you start flaming me in the comments, we'll talk about when discrimination is okay in your business later in the video. So stay tuned for that. But first, let's get into some of these complex issues that we're seeing and stuff you just need to be aware of. So as always, we're going to talk about some legal issues, but this is not specific legal advice. It's just education, entertainment. This will help you get you up to speed for when you meet with your lawyer about your situation. Also, it's not financial or investment advice. More and more state and local laws. This has been a trend for a while now that employment law is becoming largely localized, particularly in a lot of the northern cities. New York, we're going to talk about a Massachusetts law here in just a minute. New York City has specific regulations. San Francisco has specific wage and hour legislation, right? So a lot of times, not only do we have federal law over certain employment practices, then we have state laws over employment practices. And then we get into city and local laws, right? Maybe even city, county. So in some cases, you could be looking at 3-4 layers of regulation from three or four levels of government regulating you. Not to mention various agencies at the federal government. We have multiple agencies that look into employment law. So really, when you're looking at this, you need to look at this from a complex map, right? This is not a simple issue. There's not just one set of answers. And even if you get to the answer under one body of law, you may have two or three, depending on how you view it, other areas to look at. So there are no simple areas. Here we're going to zoom in today on a law that is new in Massachusetts, and this is breaking at the time of recording. You can see here, updated July 27th. We're looking at a CBS News out of Boston here, and they've got the Crown Act to prevent discrimination based on hair and how your hair is basically whether it's natural hair or how it's in certain cases how you style your hair. So this is a new law here, and you cannot discriminate based on hair texture or style within the state of Massachusetts. From another article, this picks up both school and employment situations, right? So suddenly everybody's got a new change here. This law's in effect now in Massachusetts, right? So in Massachusetts, you've got one more layer of what you can and can't do. And this really came up because a lot of people were being treated differently based on their hairstyles, right? It's called the Crown Act, which is one of these deals that they do with laws where they pick, a nice acronym and then they find a way to make the words fit, right? Creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. So this has become a full-fledged law. From the employer standpoint, which is, I know most of you that are tuning in are a business owner or a business leader. You are aware that, you have a lot of complexity in running your business. And what this really flags for us is, we've got to be paying attention to what's going on around us, right? If you're in Massachusetts, obviously you care about this greatly. A lot of times states and local governments, will follow a trend. So this may now be a trend. We may see similar laws coming to other state and local governments. But I also want to flag for you the fact that you need to get employment lawyers that are familiar with your locality, particularly if your locality is very active with lawmaking for the employer side, to make sure you're complying, right? For instance, New York, San Francisco have different laws on how wage and hours, calculation of sick leave is actually to the point where In many cases, employers can't have uniform policies across the company because employees in one locality may have local laws that require computation of sick leave and pay periods one way, and a different locality requires something different. So you may have to have localized pay policies at this time if you are operating in multiple locations because you have to comply with those laws. All of this pointing to the fact that you're going to need to get somebody who's familiar with the particular area you're in. Again, particularly if you're one of these very active cities, to make sure that you're jumping through the right hoops and that you're not leaving stuff on the table. Multiple layers of compliance. So again, as we mentioned before, you've got the federal government active in employment matters, very active. You have state governments generally are very active. Then you have potentially a county layer, potentially a city layer, right? So that's 3 to 4 layers. And then in some cases, like the federal government, there are multiple agencies involved, and those agencies often try to be consistent with each other, but sometimes it's difficult to figure out who you should be going to for what and which agency is controlling. So that is always a piece of complexity that you want to keep in mind, is just because you've cleared something through a legal analysis with one level of government or one particular agency doesn't mean you're clear on all the other layers. So it's just something to be watching as you're setting up your compliance programs to make sure that you are complying all these layers. Again, the best thing you can do is talk to an employment lawyer in your particular locality. This is one of the cases where location really matters, right? For some issues, they're very national or international securities offerings. There are state components to it, but it's more broad. Corporate law tends to be more broad, but this employment law now, especially in this modern trend, is getting very, very localized and protected. This is where I expect the flames in the comments or the controversy, but some discrimination is okay under the law. And now we're talking about discrimination for business purposes, right? Picking people based on who's a better employee, right? Who can fulfill our business mission? Who do we prefer to work with? Again, if it doesn't violate a protected category, right? And there are protected categories of discrimination under state or federal law. And so we have to look to those and make sure that we're not running afoul of them. After we comply, then we are free within the bounds of what's left to pick, our the best people. And sometimes people will come to me as a lawyer and they'll say, "Hey, my boss is a real jerk. He's discriminating against me." And the first thing we figure out is whether they're an equal opportunity jerk, right? And there are a lot of equal opportunity jerks out there. And assuming, again, they're not doing something that's illegal, they can be a jerk, right? They can just be a bad boss. And then the other thing we have to look at is, even if they are being a jerk just to one person versus more people, why are they being a jerk to that person? Is it just a general personality conflict, or does it drill down to something that is prohibited, right? So obviously you've got to comply with the law. There are many, many categories between state and federal where you can't discriminate. But then beyond that, you are free to run a business. You can pick your best employees. Just because you got a job at a company as an employee doesn't mean you get to keep getting that job, right? You can lose your job through, bad behavior, through not being a good employee, through you being a jerk, right? If you're a jerk, you can potentially be thrown out, even if, you would have, somewhat of a protected class under discrimination law. That doesn't give you an absolute guarantee to keep your job indefinitely. So it surprises people to hear that. And some specific categories of discrimination keep coming up, so you have to know the limits. Here in Florida, I'll be publishing a video on the American Freedom Information Institute here in the not too distant future, talking about Florida law. And in there, what we have is a lot of medical discrimination currently happening in Florida. There are actual cases of it, and not much is happening because it doesn't fit neatly into one of the categories, right? If you review the Florida law, it talks about discrimination, as does federal law, based on disability, which doesn't cover, things like, taking a prophylactic treatment for a virus, right? Which is a big issue these days, right? Which employees have taken these things and which employees haven't. And then the state law gets involved and starts looking at it and, is there a protection for when an employee doesn't wish to partake in some of these measures? And the answer becomes, the way the law is written, it talks about a disability. So if you don't fit into the category of disability and the discrimination is based on something that's non-disability related, then we have an issue, right? So it becomes a real issue of where do these lines start, where do they stop? And as employers, we just need to be very careful about structuring our policies to make sure that we're getting the right setup here, right? We don't want to be in a situation where we're doing illegal discrimination. We want to be, running good businesses, picking the best employees. That, if you use the word discrimination in the broad, dictionary definition, not talking about employment context, you're allowed to discern, you're allowed to look between your options, pick the best employees. That's, part of the American belief system, right? Is that we can rise to the top and we can pick the best. So that type is allowed, but you can't get into these things that are protected, such as race, origin, gender, etc. And then more and more of these categories are being added, and we can see what happened in Massachusetts, right? They've now added hair to that list. So these categories keep growing. So you have to figure out what's protected and make sure you act in accordance with the law, and then what can you actually make determinations on outside of the boundaries of the law. So there you are, folks. I would love your comments. I hope I've explained that discrimination, what's legal and what's not issue. We can come back and revisit that again, but just want to point out I'm not supporting anybody doing illegal discrimination, anybody doing things that are wrong underneath the law. But there is still a category where you can make independent decision making about who you want to work with and who you don't under the law, as long as it's not within those protected categories. So you got to be very careful about all that. All right, folks, thanks for tuning in. Look forward to reading your comments below. Go ahead and share this video with other business owners. Give me a like if you enjoyed the video, and I hope you subscribe to the channel. I'll see you soon.